Hello, everyone. Well, this is really exciting. Tonight on the 16th of May, um, this morning and this evening for some of us, Mynoo Maryel will be offering us a transmission from fear to freedom. And it's one of the pieces of flourishing, flourishing leaders, flourishing beings. Um, and it will be included in Mynoo's next book, upcoming book.
Thank you, Sarah.
Excited about discussing fear. And I really get accepting and embracing fear as a path to freedom. So over to you, Mynoo.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm looking forward to this session as well. I've done lots of work on fear myself and with people, and this one actually brings it all together. So yes, let's begin. Okay, fear to freedom. Wow. So the first thing that many of you have heard me say this over and over again, which is fear, basically as an acronym, stands for false expectations appearing real. FEAR. So as an acronym by itself, it gives you a very good hint, strong hint about, that there is no reality to what fear is. It is an expectation, which actually doesn't exist. It's something that is related to somewhere in the future. It is an expectation which does not have any root as such. It is something that we just made up, really. However, we may wish to anchor it in reality, but this is how it is done. This is how it has occurred in the past. Doesn't matter. It is just something that we made up. It is also something, as an expectation, it is something that is so rich in terms of various meanings that we have given. If someone looks at me this way, this is how they are expected to behave. Or if someone is in this kind of a relationship with me, this is how they're meant to be. This is what I'm meant to feel. Expectation by itself comes in with so much entitlement. And that entitlement from others who don't necessarily even know that you have that expectation of them. And sometimes those others are governments or, the United Nations or your family. I mean, they're like labels that aren't even there to fulfill anybody's expectation. They have their own role. So expectation by itself, all expectations are not real. And added to that, there's another layer of false expectations appearing real. It is the appearing real is where we are putting our energy into. So instead of really putting our energy into that which we believe in, that which we stand for, we are putting our energy into making something that isn't even there appear as if it is. Because it isn't even there, and we are putting our energy into having it appear as if it is, then it takes a lot of effort. It really engages a lot of your sensory organs in terms of the depth of effort that goes into making these expectations appear real. So as a result, you go in and, engage in this behavior that is so destructive, because you start giving energy to something that just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, so you don't feel in control, you're out of control. it actually accentuates all forms of self-doubt. It literally, it's like something that's like a hammer that keeps knocking your spine over and over. So it becomes really tough to stand tall in the face of all of that. So, I mean, for me, when I got this, I mean, this is something that I got maybe when in my early 20s during my MBA program. And it was one of these very senior marketing guys. He had been brought in as a specialist into my management MBA. And he was talking about how IBM trains its marketing people. And he was just talking about how they never take no for an answer, and no is only a not for now. And he just fleetingly mentioned that, after all, fear is just false expectations appearing real. And he just moved on, and kept talking about other elements of marketing. But that was a light bulb moment for me. And at that time, yes, I was doing my MBA. I was quite significantly pregnant, like in my 8th month of pregnancy. And I was in a very challenging marriage at home with domestic violence and all of that. But that was like a light bulb moment for me. Didn't do anything during the MBA program really with it. However, after my son was born, I was at home for 4 months during my maternity leave. And this thing kept ringing. It was like as if it was ringing true, that phrase that we use. And that was the first time I actually took on journaling during those 4 months. Because now I had this little life. It wasn't just about me protecting myself. I also didn't like the idea of constantly being in a state of protection now that I had a new being that I had birthed. And I wanted him to, what I now call flourishing, but I wanted him to experience joy rather than distress. Because my mother always said to me that, look, when especially when you're breastfeeding and you're with a little child, then whatever emotions the mother is feeling, the child really receives it. And it becomes a foundation. So I decided that, I was constantly walking on eggshells. I didn't like to relate to myself as a fearful person, but I was walking on eggshells at the time. And I had been for, many years by that time. And that had to stop. So like as if I took on a big vacuum cleaner and took out all the eggshells. There were no eggshells. But this fear piece was quite strong, because I also noticed that it had a direct impact. Every time I felt fearful about something, it would have a direct effect on my lactating abilities as well. It's like my body responded. You become very sensitive to how your body responds to emotions, especially during that time. So then I decided to take on this false expectations appearing real and just really, dissolve all of that. What I found was these expectations that appear real, there is that, so much reality in how we have worked with these expectations that it's very hard to believe that they are not real. So at that point, I decided that, look, rather than be in this constant debate about which expectation is the right expectation or a false expectation, what if I just write down all the expectations I have? And the first person, so it was as if I was taking all the important people in my life and I was putting them front and center and then going, okay, what are my expectations of this person? What are my expectations of, a project that I'm engaged in? At that point, I was still doing my MBA. So the first person I put, by the way, in the center was me. What are the expectations of me? And I was horrified. I actually was horrified at how many pages I wrote about my expectations of me. And then I thought, oh, wow. So let me see how I'm doing against these expectations. High, medium, low. High means I'm really on it. It's all great. Low means I'm struggling. And then there was a zero, which basically meant I had let myself down. Maybe 10% were high. I had a good 20, 30% that were medium. I used colors to do it. I was shocked at how many were zero. I was also shocked that I even had those expectations. But they were there. But even just simply writing them down about myself was liberating in a way. I realized as I was reading my own list of expectations that were anchored in this is how I am meant to be, and I'm not. So, what I did next was I took those that were low and that were like zero, and I looked at, well, you know, there are some persistent complaints that I carry about myself. I'm always running out of time. You know, I'm always um, feeling that whilst I have great accomplishments with a few people, most people I let down because I just don't have enough time in the day. That it's really hard for me to lose weight. That people just dump their, you know, what they are supposed to do on me, and I'm supposed to do it. And yet, when I want some support, then people don't even understand that I could even want support because they see me as this person who can do everything. Then I realized that, oh, wow, I have all these persistent complaints, and each persistent complaint actually gives me a way of being. So with people that I am subservient to, I start avoiding them. With people, and sometimes what by avoid or I just compromise. Both of those, avoidance and compromise, were both experiences that I completely detested. I also saw that sometimes with people who I had control over, I would become aggressive, like quite a strong aggressor. And then I hated myself for that. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what's going on in terms of me. And then I saw that there was a whole collection of I should have done this. I shouldn't have let this go. There was no why me type thing at all going on with me. However, there was a lot of I should have and I should not have. And that I saw was starting to deplete my own confidence. Now that it's just taking me and my expectations of me and all of this that started to play out, I realized that this is at the genesis of how fear is holding me back. This is like giving rise to fear as this negative emotion that's like trapping me. And it's all coming from expectations that I have made as uh, are real, and I'm like really not up to it, and therefore they're not there, they're not happening. And therefore there's something off with me, there's something wrong. I made myself so wrong over all of these decades. That was in itself liberating. realizing this. Then I went into expectations I have of other people. What I realized was, as someone who had such high, such expanded, and such widespread expectations of myself, I was the same way with others. Completely living, breathing, walking disappointment waiting to happen. There was hardly a chance that anyone would be able to fulfill the expectations I had. So of course, there was meaning that I gave to myself when I saw others from whom I had expectations not fulfilling it. I made it mean that I was not a good enough leader. I couldn't inspire them. Not only that, I found that people I had high expectations of, including my husband at the time, he was actually engaging in annihilation of me, let alone fulfilling the expectations. So it is literally like as if I'm adding fuel to an already raging fire of fear that was stopping me. And then, so that in itself was huge. It's like, what if I just drop these expectations? What if I just let people be who they are, you know, and allow them to show up, the way they show up? Because I have so many expectations, I am so rapid at creating meaning when they don't fulfill those expectations. And then I become this meaning making machine that starts to live in this world which has no foundation. So I'm constantly off my center. And that's how we relate to fear, something that stops us, something that takes us off track. But hey, at the root of it are these expectations that we have made to appear real. I mean, right now I'm quite a prolific writer. I can write a lot and I can write very fast. At that time, I was a hopeless writer. I could not write at all. I could at the most do bullet points, a few bullet points. I could express statistics, patterns, all of that, which was necessary for my work. But other than that, there was no writing. Journaling was a huge job for me. And thank God for those 4 months of maternity leave that I was, and this false expectations appearing real, ringing true for me, that I took on to journaling. So as a result, there was no expression that was taking place. So for me to even write down all of this stuff, I started to see patterns. But I also started to see that gripping feeling that I had in my tummy when fear would start to build up. And I had this every evening when before my husband was coming home, there would be that gripping feeling. And I was clear that with this baby that I now had birthed into the world that I was looking after, I cannot have any part of my day with this disgusting, awful gripping feeling. It's as if that gripping feeling would first begin in my solar plexus. Then I would feel as if like big clamps have come in around my ankles. And that every step I took was heavy. It was like a drag. And I was not going to allow that to happen. So I was like, if I can already feel such a sense of liberation, then only focusing on the expectations I have of myself. And then when I saw the feeling of freedom that I had, when I looked at all the expectations I had of all of these other people, most of them did not even know I had those expectations. So therefore, there was no chance of them even fulfilling it. I realized that there were things that I was engaged in that I had expectations of. There was no human involved. I'm a part of such a culture. And this culture is supposed to do, is supposed to do this and that and all of that. But what have I got from this culture? Or a particular project that I'm involved in. And this project was meant to really get me to apply my financial management skills and bring out marketing. And, lo and behold, I have been put into only doing this small part of this particular project. So all of these expectations I had from a project, hello, but I didn't realize that they were there. All I was present to was the experience of it. And by the way, I wouldn't even have got there had I not cleared my field of all of these expectations that I was, constantly propelling and multiplying about myself and then about others. Because it was literally as if by just simply acknowledging it, I had pulled the flush down and they had disappeared. And even things like, I knew it was not the right thing to do getting married to this guy. I should have listened and not done it. I mean, like, what was the point of even thinking something like that? However, it was, and it wasn't even an expectation, but it was all these should and should nots and the must and the need and I have to were actually birthed from these expectations. And it is the should and should nots and the regrets that really was anchoring these expectations or the disappointment from them in my reality. So, this is the first thing for you to get about fear. It literally is false expectations appearing real. What I learned was all expectations actually are not real. There is no foundation to them, there is no root to them. We have to work hard at justifying why it is correct for us to expect this. But what if you just simply live with intentionality? This is what I intend to occur. And actually, here's what I saw. I'm going back to those 4 months where I became a master of liberating myself from the expectation web. What I saw was that every time something powerful and positive had occurred, I was just intentional about it. I did not drive the happening of that through expectations. There was a huge project. I think, Sarah, you might have been in the UK at the time. There was Margaret Thatcher was in, and she had introduced something called council tax. And all the computer systems had to be changed. And it was a huge task. The big computers that were there just did not even have the computing power to handle it. So new computers were bought in by IBM for the first time. And I was one of those, leading light project managers of a system like this that was going to affect millions and millions of people. There's a lot at stake. And we did it. We did it, even though technology had its own challenges. But it's like I had a whole team of IBM that actually came in to support me because my success meant that IBM could sell many more machines over the next many years because we were able to use those machines to make this humongous system deliver what the legislation was asking to be delivered. So when I looked at that, I had the intention. There were no expectations. There was an intention, there was a plan, and there was action. And we were just doing the action. And we weren't just waiting for a week even. It would be like every single day. We had the overarching blueprint of what needed to be done. We had the overarching game plan that we were working towards, and there was a very precise project plan. And every day we would get together and look at where we were in that context. So as a result, in the team, there weren't any arguments about, but you said you were going to do this, and so didn't do it, therefore I wasn't. There was no justifications at all. So I realized, wow, that's true. And we were completely fearless in going ahead and doing this, knowing that it can be done. And knowing that nobody had done this before. Even this cluster of computers and computing power that had been brought to bear to make this happen had not actually been implemented in this way before. Theoretically, it was possible, and we came from intentionality. There was no expectation as such. There was simply an intention, which I would now say a resolve. And it was time bound. The next financial year, the new tax was going to be in. And if you didn't have the system, then literally councils, local councils would lose hundreds of millions. Now, because we didn't have any expectations, there was a lot of media frenzy around it because there was this political parties wanting to pull each other down. Somehow, all we had was support. We didn't have anything directed at us because it was a team of us that was just intentional about doing what needed to be done. That, with hindsight, that is when we took that next step that I keep talking about. So I realized that actually I have had some pretty chunky experiences which did not come from expectations. Sai was born in May the 13th. April the 4th, the month prior, my system went live. So it was very fresh at the time for me to see what had played out where there was no expectations. We only operated from reality. And we were fueled by intention. So, for yourself, look at your own expectations of yourself, of others. And really, all there is to do is acknowledge that you have these expectations and unconditionally accept the reality of what is and release them. Now, when you release these expectations, by the way, you immediately get presence to, in my reality, who really matters right now. And what is my intention in that relationship? What matters right now in terms of projects? What is my intention there? And operate from that intentionality. And once you get the intention, rather than looking at what went right, what went wrong, and if you feel that something doesn't quite feel that great, you simply ask, what's missing and essential that I can put in place for myself that will have me be more consistent with what my intention is? And then simply take the next step next. When you operate in this way, there's no fear. There's no need for it to be there. There is only what is real. There is only that beautiful connection to your heart space, which is making, when you connect to your heart, you're present in the now, and now is the moment of miracles. You start becoming present to all that is going on that is making your heart sing. Now, it does not mean that you don't have accountabilities. You do, but when you're coming from false expectations appearing real, you are multiplying that multifold. I have to get this done by this time or I lose my company. Well, neither the company is lost, neither that time has yet come. But that have to has created so much burden that so much of your vital life force is now being depleted. It's like you've turned a massive leak on of your vitality. Now, how are you going to get the energy, the clarity of thought to be able to accomplish what requires to be accomplished? Because you're so stuck in the have to. And when you're stuck in the have to, you are also fueled by The worry, what if it doesn't happen? So what are you giving energy to? What if it doesn't happen? It does not happen. So when people come to me and say, this has to occur, I can see what's there for that person, but I can also see they are so that they're like completely intertwined at every level in what if it doesn't work? Because they have bought into this idea that it has to happen. It has to happen. But maybe the divine doesn't, has got some other plans. So there are so many pieces that stem from these expectation web that the sooner you actually diffuse it, it is literally like a spider's web. I mean, I lived in Bali, right? So there would be times when I would be going and I would be meditating, and in no time at all, a spider would create a web from my arm or my shoulder or something, attached to a tree. And what was amazing was it is tough to break a web, even a spider's web. It's so fine, but you can't just break it. It takes some effort to break even a spider's web, which is so fine, let alone this web that of expectations that we keep ourselves trapped in. So let's look at the second aspect of fear. Sarah, I just want checking in with you. Is there anything that is showing up for you that you want to say or share at this point?
What I'm getting really clear about is how being fueled by intention, that it's our choice to focus on, that we can, it's our choice. We have a choice. And I always think when I'm in fear, I don't have a choice. And then that web begins to be created. And it's very powerful for me now to think of being fueled by intention instead of the expectations or the have tos and shoulds. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's quite liberating. So the second one about fear. So now that I know, okay, false expectations appearing real, drop it. There is no reality to expectations. And by acknowledging it, I actually really clean out my field. But that cleaning out is still surface dusting. It's not deep cleaning yet. The second one is where the deep cleaning actually occurs around fear. And there are some of you here who've done my program called The Journey into Miracles. And in The Journey into Miracles, I talk about fear as a sergeant major. It is like a sergeant major of your army of support, of collaborators and co-creators. And this sergeant major is there to support you to live your calling in this lifetime. Now, fear as an energy, and you know that it is a very important sergeant major, because when it shows up in its negative connotation, it stops you. And fear is one of those emotions that literally shows up across the 6 cylinders. It has an impact and it makes itself known across physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, and environmentally. So it is a powerful sergeant major that is here to enable us to live our true calling that is to be expressed by our soul in this human form was wow, but very hard to comprehend or accept. Now, this download came to me in one of my periods of silence. This was a 10-day period of silence. It turned out to be 12 days, period of silence. And it was in that this body of work came in. And there were many other aspects to this body of work where we do have a collection of sergeant majors. Fear is a big one, biggie. So when I got this, I thought, this feels unreal that it can even be this way. However, show me is what I said. It was an intuitive thing. So I said, show me. I said, show me. And what I didn't realize was I thought I'll sit in my meditation and I'll get all of these answers when I say, show me. That is not what happened. Because what fear wanted to show me, look at it, my throat. I'm going to go for another water. Was that it is a full spectrum. It has a full understanding of the full spectrum that makes up my being. And I was going to have a full-on experience of fear across physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, and environmentally. That's what it wanted to show me. And it also wanted to show me how it is a sergeant major. So I was in a Buddhist monastery, and many of you read about this in my book, and I was on this period of silence. And in this silence, so I was the only person that was living in this entire, it was the silence retreat extension of the Buddhist monastery. It was a 90-acre estate, and I was the only person living there. There was nobody else, because I had got permission from Ajahn Brahm, who was the lead monk there, that I could do the silence retreat on myself. So I would go into the meditation chamber. So I went there in the afternoon and I was completely ready. I'm going to actually meditate on fear and see what emerges. So I went into this space. And when I emerged, it was several hours later, it was completely dark. We didn't have iPhones with this sort of light at the time. I had that little, what was it called? Little Nokia phone. I did have a mobile phone, but the little Nokia phone. So I come out of there. There was light in the meditation chamber itself, and I come out, and it's completely dark, complete. You can't see a thing, and it's a cloudy night, and I sort of know where the pagoda is. So with just that little bit of light of that little screen, I made my way to the pagoda, and I thought I'll just sit here, and I just sat there, and as I sat there. At that point, I was in the state of bliss. There were no answers around fear that came in other than it is full spectrum. And that I was about to have a big breakthrough. And I would completely understand how fear supports me in a full spectrum way. And at that moment, I'm sitting in the pagoda, I start becoming aware of the sounds, because this 90-acre estate had lots of Australian forests around. So in the Australian, even behind your home, let alone in an Australian forest, not only do you have the wild animals, you also have a number of quite deadly creepy crawlies. And some of them don't even look like anything, but actually they are quite deadly. Now, so I'm just sitting there in the state of bliss. I knew it was full moon, but I couldn't see anything. It was just there was no moon at all, no stars, no moon. And I'm sitting there and I'm now feeling that buildup of fear inside me. And after a long time, I had that tight gripping feeling that I used to have when I was married in my domestic violence days. And that would always shake me up. And I would literally I started feeling the strength in my spine just dissolve. And I'm like, come on, you said that you were about to show me how it supports me in a full spectrum way. I can't even walk. I don't even know where my little room is, So I need to be able to walk into my room. I don't even have a sense of direction. And I couldn't bear the thought of spending the night in the open. The weather was fine, but God knows what else would be there. Because even the ants used to be this big. They were quite, and I'm not exaggerating, there were this big red ants that were there. So you very rarely sat against a tree. It was like all of those, remember, all of those expectations and meanings given to those expectations literally started coming up. And at that point, I started just letting whatever was coming up come up. And I decided I am not going to move here. It is a full moon night. I just called to the four directions. At that point, I had actually learned to be with various, indigenous Aborigines, and I saw how they invoked the power of the directions. They had not taught me this. I had just seen it happen. And I just decided to use that, invoke the power of the directions because I didn't know what else. I didn't want to focus on any living things because God knows how many living things might show up. So I could hear the rustles. I could hear there was no wind. So the rustles meant there was something moving. All that kind of stuff was going on. So all forms of mentally, I'm going crazy because that thoughts and meaning being generated that is actually emotionally making me feel weaker and weaker. And at this point, I'm getting disconnected from my own spirit. What that does is it disconnects you from the spirit of nature. Spirit of nature is the one that wraps you in okayness. So now I'm only zoomed into my own fear. And then I go into the social cylinder, and I'm not doing any of this consciously. This is just my imagination running wild. I'm starting to see, oh, wow, the monk did say in the evenings I should go be in the monastery. I wonder when they're going to find me here, if anything does happen. Maybe it's the cleaner's day tomorrow. Oh, what does it do to Sai? He doesn't even, I mean, everybody said I shouldn't come here. And they're going to wait for 15 days before they come looking for me. I'm like making all this stuff up, and it's just starting to, and then I go into regrets, if only I had done this, then at least I would feel complete about my sister, and all sorts of stuff starting to come up. I am completely disconnected from my spirit. I'm also completely disconnected from the environment I'm in. And at this point, when the social stuff started to build up, you know, I became what I was before I went into my spiritual awakening, which is numb to all feelings, because that was my protection mechanism. But I hated that feeling of numbness because it's like my spine tightened, everything tightened. And I just sat there completely numb to everything. And then I remember feeling as if there's like a big moth that just flew just past my face, like a bit of its wing touched my forehead or something. And I became aware of my environment. And when I became aware of my environment, I suddenly started feeling this cool breeze. And I looked up at the sky, and big, fluffy, grayish clouds started to appear. And I kept staring at the clouds, saying, are they going to move? Will I see the moon? And lo and behold, they moved. And it was a full moon night. The moon came on. It was like a flashlight, like a huge flashlight. I saw where was meant to live, where I was living. And I walked up there, got into my room, and I was in the safety of my room. And that's when I just sat on my bed. And that's when it all came through. How fear is a sergeant major. I actually there was like a downpour of downloads. And I started writing. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, without reading what I was writing. And then when I looked at what I had written, what I had written was that, here an incident took place. I experienced fear in a full spectrum way. And I moved forward and came back, returned to the magic of what is, reconnected to my environment, experienced being enveloped in okayness, and lo and behold, magic appeared. The clouds parted, the moon showed, and here I am, completely bathing in such gratitude and so much love for all that is, knowing that I am so supported, not just by humans, but by elements, by, at that point I'd invoked the directions, by all living things. Like anything could have happened, anything could have happened, and it didn't, you know? So fear actually, what it did for me was it opened, I was feeling the fear. And when I chose to simply know that fear is reminding me of something, it opened a doorway. It opened the doorway to a knowingness that expecting and accepting miracles are the norm. In the now, there are only miracles. The moment I reconnected to that, I was free. That made me connect the dots, and I realized actually, now do I feel fear? I don't. I am still alone in this 90-acre estate. And maybe I've come back with a red back or something on my clothes, possible. I could be spinning those stories in my head, and I wasn't. I was actually feeling that sense of freedom. At a cellular level, I was experiencing it. There was no fear. So what I realized was that fear really is my rock. It is my rock. It is there, steadfast, there, unwavering, no matter how I feel about it. It is there to support me in a full spectrum way to live the calling of my soul. And it was the fear when when I went past it, it was there to wake me up. Go across the threshold, Mynoo. There's magic there. There are miracles there. The moment I crossed the threshold, boom, magic started unfolding. So it only shows up when I forget that expecting and accepting miracles are the norm. So fear, in fact, opened the doorway to miracles. So whenever it shows up, so from that was such a huge aha. And I would not have had that experience if I wasn't there, because it was such a full blown experience at every level. And I really went into what miracles am I experiencing physically right now? And I just literally went in, and there was so much I was able to write. What am I experiencing mentally? I would say that was probably the first time I experienced complete stillness. There was that wonderful anchoring of stillness, where my mind was full of celebration, and yet I was feeling completely still. At an emotional level, I felt coherence, which I'd never experienced before. There was nothing, there was no duality, there was simply oneness. At a spiritual level, that is where I connected to that vibrational frequency of being human, which is love. I was feeling amplified in a state of complete harmony. At a social level, it was this harmony. I felt as if I was with everyone, and everyone was with me, and we were one. That sense of duality just disappeared. And I was completely present to my environment, to my monastic, cute little room, to that little, villa that I was in. It was a sort of, I'm using the term villa, but it was like a bungalow that I was in, and how protected and fortunate I was to be surrounded by so many living beings all around me in this forest. So fear opened the doorway to miracles. And I literally started seeing miracle wasn't something that happens one day, someday in the future. It is what is occurring now. Now is only a moment of miracles. This whole experience of fear intensified, and the realization that there are many, many times in my life where I've experienced fear and gone ahead anyway. I saw every time in my life that I did that, I actually experienced miracles. Now, that is what fear was for me. Opened the doorway to miracles. So if you were to look for yourself, you've experienced fear in your life before, and here you are. You move forward despite that. What opened up for you? As a result of feeling the fear and moving forward anyway. And with that opening, what became possible for you? And when you harness those possibilities, what kind of opportunities started coming your way? What did that make available to you? And as you started living your life with all of that available to you, what kind of experience of life did you have? And that is what fear opens the doorway for, that experience of life. Expecting and accepting miracles as the norm makes my life whole and complete. In the now, in the moment. And our existence as a life, we already have. As long as you're breathing in and out, you have life. It's simply a state. It's living this life is what provides the key to aliveness. And if I'm living my life plugged in, anchored, connected to all these miracles that are occurring in the moment, I have an experience of aliveness on tap that is regenerative and continually regenerates itself. That is something that I got from understanding that fear not only is my rock, it is the rock star that enables me to cross the threshold into miracles. Yes, thank you, Juston. Indeed, that is something that occurred. Just allow it to sink in. I mean, listen to this recording over and over again. I will have Anushri share it. I just want to check in with you, Sarah, if there's anything that is showing up for you, because there are a few other pieces that I want to talk about fear to fear.
Yeah, quickly. And also Janice left a comment which is related to what I was going to ask you, but can you see it? Janice writes, fear is just energy. Mynoo, you collapsed into the energy of it instead of resisting it, and it became your teacher, taking you to the next level. So, and then also, Asha also relates to what I wanted to bring up. What is a practical way to release fear? So
Yes.
my experience of fear, which not all the time, but let's say some of my favorite topics, is when I'm sitting here and there's something for me to express by writing, whether it's a legal document or a statement. And I kind of collapse into that and resist it and keep wanting to push it away and pushing it away, which I've been doing for a long time. And how would I experience, what would it look like when you're resisting something as opposed to embracing the lessons from it? How would I open the doorways to miracles if I'm sitting there pushing it away and pushing it? I'm doing that for a long period of time.
Yes, yes. So I'm going to answer two things at the same time. One, let's answer Asha's question about what is a practical way of releasing fear. So the first thing that I talked about was the false expectations appearing real. So at least flush out these false expectations out of your system, right? So just go ahead and at least use the expectation, the acknowledgement of various expectations, and just release them. That is the first thing that you would do. The second thing, which was a part of the work I did on fear, when I discovered that fear for me opened the doorway to miracles, I decided that, okay, this is how I wish to relate to fear from now on, you know? But I know that from my past experiences, there is a lot of programming, conscious, subconscious, which puts me, puts me in a relationship to fear, which is like dysfunctional. So that is there. So I decided that I'm actually going to use the power of elements. Bring in the power of elements. Because at that point, I was very plugged into the directions. I decided to bring in the power of elements. And that is where some of the work that many of you have done with me, where I talk about burning and all of that, came from, right? So I decided to make two lists, and you can do the same. Make two lists. The first list is all the different ways which have been quite dysfunctional that you may have related to fear in the past. And I had many ways. It stopped me. I gave it power. I use it to justify why something couldn't be done. I used it as a way of, resisting, being accountable, right? And really, because I was going to put a stop to it, I wrote down what it was, and I put a period at the end. Wrote another one down, put a period at the end. So I made a full list of every different ways in which I had related to fear, as if fear was this ogre or some big giant or something that was stopping me. So I wrote all of those down in that I was going to put a stop to. So I brought conscious awareness to those subconscious, unconscious pieces that were stuck in my field. The second thing I did was I made a list of all that I was fearful about, that I wanted to put a stop to. Fear about not having enough money to travel to India in case my mom became really ill. Fear of um, uh, not being able to have access to my assets because I had been away for so long from England. Put a stop to that. Fear of my own health. Put a stop to that. Like a whole variety of them. Fear of the stuff like not being able to buy the home of my dreams. There were material stuff as well, as because I was like in transition to full-on spiritual awakening at that time. So it was quite a long list. Now, because I was there in these days of silence, I didn't rush and make the list and go burn it. I actually took time. I made the list that night before I slept, knowing that I was bringing in the power of elements. So I had already invoked the elements of fire, of water, of air, of earth, and of ether. So I was already in a container where I was going to operate in this space of fear having opened the doorway to miracles for me. So I had already invoked the space element. Space element is another very powerful multiplier. That's what its role is. Fire, I was going to bring in. Once I had made the list, my intention was to use fire as the element to destroy that which I had written. So destruction actually, fire as an element destroys, and in its destruction, it transmutates to a new state. And my new state was going to be one of flow. So I knew I had called in the element of fire, but I was going to apply that only after I had finished my list. So it took about 2 to 3 days of writing all of these different pieces. And then I brought in the element of water. So once I'd written the list, I burnt them. I was in the open, so I literally took a pan because I wanted to bring in the water element. I took a pan from the room, and I had for incense, I had little matchsticks. So I used the matchstick to burn this paper. It was doing it in the open air. So air element was also invoked. Air element blows away the clutter and brings focus. Once everything was burnt into ash, I added water, brought in the water element, which actually washes away the debris. So if there was any element that was still remaining, it washed it away and brought flow. And then I poured this mixture into the earth. So I put a stake in the ground. From this point on, fear is my rock and my rock star. And if it ever shows up, I'm not going to go where I had all those dysfunctional beliefs. I'm really going to go into, aha, fear is showing up. It's reminding me that I've disconnected two miracles. What is the miracle here right now that I'm meant to connect to, that I'm not connecting to? And that's where I'm going to go with it. And I have continually done that. It's not that I have not had fear from time to time. I have. And because I go into fear is my rock to live the calling of my soul. In the context of the calling of my soul, I'm right now not connected to miracles. So fine, I stand up, I take a step forward as if fear is by my side, and I'm crossing the threshold into a realm of miracles. And then I start acknowledging everything that I see right there, right now, that is making my heart sing. So it's useful to do this process fully. So at least you have a mega flush out of your fears. You can also do this, by the way, to all the expectations that you write down. You know, if you want to just flush it all out of your system, use the power of the elements. And you will then experience that lightness of being that comes from self-liberation. And the power of what fear is releasing you from. And then you will have the space. So in my point to you, Sarah, in terms of your question, when we feel that fear is causing resistance and we are not able to complete what we know we are meant to get done, take that power back, because fear isn't doing that. All fear is doing is, I can ask you right now, you've experienced fear in your life before?
Yes.
Okay. And you've still carried on. However uncomfortable it may be, you've carried on. You move forward, right?
Yeah.
So what became available to you as a result of feeling the fear and moving forward anyway?
Sometimes opportunities that I hadn't thought about. Certainly an opening, a clearing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So having
And new ideas.
new ideas, okay. So having access to these opportunities and being in a space where there's a new opening and there's a clearing and new ideas are showing up, what becomes possible when you have all of this?
Anything. The miracles. There's a freedom. Definitely a freedom and a sense of achievement. A sense of acknowledgement of oneself.
Mm-hmm. So when you have this sense of achievement, sense of acknowledgement of yourself, that freedom is there, the miracles are available, are possible, and anything is possible. All of that is available to you, right? And and all of that is possible. So there you are harnessing all of these possibilities. What kind of a life are you living?
A flourishing life. Well, a life of freedom where liberation. You feel liberation, flow, flourishing.
Yeah. So fear actually is your sergeant major that is opening the doorway to a flourishing life where you're experiencing freedom and self-liberation.
Never thought about that one.
What it's doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Whenever it shows up, yeah, your reaction may be resistance, but it is only showing up to remind you that, hey, Sarah, stand up, cross the threshold with me, and voila, you're in this clearing of a flourishing life, of self-liberation and freedom as your reality.
I'm writing
It's
that
only when
down.
you forget that. You see, it's only when you forget that that fear shows up. Otherwise, it doesn't show up.
Well, because when fear shows up, it can be as debilitating. It can be so strong because it's all this
Only
created, right?
it's only because you've given it that power. But now that you know, it is your rock, unwaveringly supporting you to live your true calling. So it will remind you when you forget what it's about. And it will remind you in no unequivocal terms. It'll remind you in unequivocal terms what it is there for. Sarah, you have a flourishing life. Experience that liberation and freedom. A moment you
Oh,
say, okay, where in my life, right now, here I'm stopped, but where in my life am I experiencing that flourishing and liberation and freedom? Here. Wow. Okay. Now you can come into the now, because in the now, there is no past, there is no future, there is only what is. Resistance disappears. That
that's-
is the key thing to remember. It is a rock, an unwavering rock. And it as this rock that is a stand for you realizing the calling of your soul, it becomes your rock star of your journey into freedom.
So tomorrow morning, when I sit down to write this paper, I'm going to go right
Yeah.
into, oh,
Release
fear.
it.
Fabulous. I'll
What
embrace you.
what what would you what
You're
I
my
would
sunshine.
suggest you do is what I did, which is I made the list of those dysfunctional beliefs I have about fear. And, like fear gives me hives. Hello, gives me
Mm.
migraines. All sorts of stuff. I had many of those. I just have all these acne showing up. Hello, fear, seriously, But it isn't. It's really us that is, making meaning out of it. And that, along with the medley of expectation that already exists, it becomes such a full-on showstopper. And actually, it's a curtain raiser.
Mm. Mm. That's brilliant. We can turn it on its head.
Yeah,
It has a useful, so that's the usefulness of it.
yeah.
It's a gift in a unexpected way.
Beyond gift. It's beyond gift. I mean, I call it a sergeant major of my army of resources and support, collaborators, comrades, co-creators to live the calling of my soul.
All right, I'm going to try this on.
Don't try. In my world, nobody tries
Oh,
anything.
right. No, try it on. I meant wear it. I'm going to wear it.
Yes, yes,
I'm
yes.
wearing
Excellent.
it.
Wearing it. Yes. Do the exercise of putting a
Okay.
stop to fear. Okay. All the
Thanks.
dysfunctional beliefs, all that you're fearful about, write it, put a stop, burn it, add water to the ashes. So that's how you're invoking the water element, Raki. And then you pour it into soil.
Perfect.
Okay.
My weekend project. Thank you.
So this I'm going to continue this session until we get to its end. So this is not limited by an hour. But in case any of you had only set aside an hour and you need to leave, you leave. Would be great for you to just share the one word that you're present to before you leave. So we will continue, Sarah. Okay. I want us to really get this. We are up close and personal in the heart of fear right now. So let's make the most of it and experience that freedom. Now, by this time, with what I've already shared, you already know that what the third aspect that fear enables, and which is how it results in freedom, is focus. Fear as as an energy force is a very powerful focus energy force. So when you're dealing with it in a dysfunctional way, it focuses your attention on somehow remaining a victim of it. It is a very powerful force of focus. But when you are experiencing the freedom that comes from your understanding of fear in terms of what it is, what it enables for you to accomplish, you focus on amplifying what you're here to do and make happen. And that mobilizes resources like you could not have imagined. And why is it doing that? Because, just imagine that here is an energy. As Janet said, fear is an energy. It is correct. It is an energy, and it is a forceful one. And it has such a huge, um, strength that it can stop you even from living the calling of your soul. And it can stop you in big ways and small ways and a variety of ways. So given that that is so, if you now turn that energy, it has the same forceful force and focus to that which you intend, and you're operating from a sense of freedom without the entitled expectations, you literally open yourself up to receiving all the resources. And resources from sources known and unknown come to you at paced exactly as you're meant to have them paced, so you realize the calling of your soul. I'm seeing it in my life. I see it so many times a day. Even something as simple as I decided, okay, my next book is a trilogy, and it is a trilogy that is focused on business and work and how we show up in it. And my first book is going to be a book that I haven't written yet, which is Flow, and it's going to be done in 5 days. On the 10th of June, we actually start the launch campaign for this book. But a book has not been written yet. That was like 10 days ago. And so therefore it has to happen. The book has to be written in 5 days. So I know what are the missing pieces. So I can start adding to those missing pieces. And it was around that time when I started writing the book that I knew fear to freedom is an important part. And I asked who is interested in being a part of this, because I know this is a missing piece that I do require to work with in this book. And I didn't realize that the book would already be written by the 15th. And lo and behold, it was written. How did that happen? I did not spend all day, every day doing the book. Many of you have been in my sessions, so you know that I have many hours a day that I'm doing many other things. I literally just use my rock star fear in this realm, expecting and accepting miracles and allowing myself to be focused on my intention. That's all I have to do. What we do is we focus on that meaning that we've given that stops us, that we call with the label of fear. But the moment you drop all of that, you can actually focus on your intention. And lo and behold, some amazing, amazing support that just kept coming through. People kept rising in ways that I didn't expect. And I was able to practice time segmentation in exactly the way I write about, which is to create a segment, focus your attention on that segment and only that segment. So therefore, I was doing a chapter every 30 minutes, almost. I was able to make that happen. But that came from using this power of this force of focus, which is what fear is. The fourth element that I want to talk about in the context of fear is it is the great amplifier. Fear is the great amplifier. And what is it amplifying? It is amplifying abundance. I mean, the moment I got that fear as my sergeant major takes me across the threshold, and I'm in the realm of miracles. The moment you get, Sarah, that fear is showing up, it's a sergeant major holding your hand to get across the threshold into the experience of flourishing, where freedom and self-liberation is your reality. The fact that fear is the one that's enabled you to cross that threshold, it's an automatic amplifier. You know, that experience of liberation is moment by moment. The moment you're in the past or the future, you're not liberated. You're bound by that. Something that doesn't exist and something that that has never existed. Past doesn't exist, future has never existed. So the moment you cross the threshold, you're in this flourishing space, there is no fear. In its negative way, there is only the fear, the great amplifier of that experience. So lo and behold, I was writing the chapters of my book focused in the moment. Each moment is limitless. There is no time to it. When you start operating from in the moment, from this understanding of the whole and completeness of the moment, it is infinitely amplifying because you're owning your presence with conscious awareness as a human. You're in the vibrational frequency of love, which is automatically an amplifier. And, you know, now you're using the power of fear as the great amplifier. And that's what happened. It amplified. I did from time to time bring in, for example, I use some of ChatGPT to refine certain elements. And I brought in my own intuitive guidance to guide me to become this amazing prompt master. That got me exactly what I needed to have. And then when I got what I needed to have, I just was able to use my own intuitive guidance to, know which is where my personal intervention was required to change certain things around, which I did. It all began with bodies of work that had been created over the last 30 years, 30 to 40 years. So fear is a great amplifier. Just remember that. So when you are using the force of focus applied to your intention, fear is the great amplifier. In its amplification, it actually harnesses all of the resources that you require to come into play. The fifth one is resilience, restoration, and resurrection. It's three pieces combined together. We already saw the very fact, all of us and each of us here, we have experienced fear in a variety of ways. And we have carried on nonetheless. There's just somebody at the door. Just pause a moment. I need to let them in and ask them to wait. So, given that we've all experienced fear from time to time, and we've continued anyway, and you've seen, if you follow through the exercise as you listen to this recording again, what fear enables, you already know that resilience is there at a cellular memory level. You have resilience, the fact that we are all here. And if you just allow yourself to go with the flow, you actually enter a realm of coherence. In this realm of coherence, restoration and resurrection is normal. Because what happens is when you are and this is all very conscious awareness body of work. You're very plugged into your human form. The human form gives you evidence 123 trillion times over and over. At a cellular level, every cell restores and sometimes resurrects itself over and over. We are these phenomenal, resilient beings. We just simply are that. And fear is a very powerful, brings about a very powerful remembrance of that at a foundation level. Nothing, really nothing can destroy us. Nothing can destroy us. Nothing can occur that we don't give ourselves permission to. Permission itself is a permit that we give ourselves to live our mission, our soul's mission. So literally each of these aspects enables you to know that whenever fear shows up, it is simply reminding you that the doorway to freedom is open. Come cross the threshold. And many of these pieces that I have covered, you can, work through what I have already shared, and you will experience that freedom. Sarah, I'm going to hand it over back to you to complete our session today.
Wow. Yeah, I'm excited I recommend we all do these lists, and I'm going to remind myself over the next couple of days about fear being my sergeant major, and that because we never see it as a positive.
Yeah.
We really don't. And as something that's constructive. It's always destructive. So you've brought into the reality of fear all of these different dynamics, both the ones that we associate with fear traditionally, and then these dynamics of flourishing and liberation and freedom and resurrection and resilience, which we really don't. We never look at how fear can give us access, or actually is not even giving us access. It's I don't know how would you put it? It's
providing evidence. It's providing evidence. It is so. It literally is providing us that evidence that it is so. That's the magical part of it. The main thing is do that initial work first. The expectations piece is a very big one that creates so much noise, that in that noise, we are able to do anything is pretty miraculous.
But we carry this noise. I mean, I've become conscious of that during this conversation and on a daily basis, how much noise that we carry in our head, even if I'm conscious about carrying it. And
so flush out the noise first.
Okay.
Flush out that noise first, then look at transforming your relationship to fear, understanding what fear is, like that exercise we did with you, and then you use the power of the elements to get rid of the remaining pieces that don't serve you around fear. So make those lists and burn them and put water and put them in the soil. Now you are clean, you're clear. It's a little bit like Sarah. We made fear like this deep-seated abscess.
Yes.
And so whenever if anybody has ever experienced an abscess yourself or seen someone with, it takes a lot of cleaning of it before anything can be done to the wound. So that's why the first two pieces are important, because they make you understand what this is. It is actually like a master healer. And we've made it this ogre that is stopping us, and it isn't. Now, once you've done those pieces, be clear about your intention, even if your intention is to experience aliveness. Some of us have a very clear intention. of how that aliveness expresses itself. Like for me, it is expecting and accepting miracles are the norm for humans and humanity. And that's why I teach aliveness for people to live the life they love. That is what is motivating me. For others, it will be you experiencing aliveness, whatever it is. Get clear about your intention. Now, the force of focus, which is what fear is, can be applied. Um, amplification, the grand amplifier, can then become activated. Resilience, restoration, resurrection is a given.
Yeah, what I so much appreciate about this transmission tonight is that you've brought it to like the reality of my experience, other experiences of fear, and on a daily basis, what can we do to
Yes, absolutely.
transform it? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Deep appreciation from me and everyone that's going to read the book, in which this is going to be one of the secrets of flourishing leaders. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Namaskar. That was fabulous.
Thank you, Mynoo.
You're welcome.
Amazing.
Bye.